You ready? Okay. Morgan City RDA meeting of session. It is December 14th. First time on the agenda. First, I welcome all of you here. Welcome to this meeting and discuss the RDA business and the things of the RDA. Number one item on the agenda is discussion and or action to consider the following Morgan City Regional Agency hybrid meeting minutes. So if you had a chance to look at the minutes, I'll entertain a motion on the minutes.
Mayor,
Tony?
I will make a motion that we approve of the Morgan City Redevelopment Agency hybrid meeting minutes of November 23rd, 2021.
Second.
Motion by Tony, second by David, that we adopt the hybrid meetings of the Morgan City Redevelopment Agency of November 23rd, 2021. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, proceed to vote. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passed. Meetings are adopted the 23rd meeting, November 23rd meeting. Okay, item number 2, commercial incentive application on a property located at 177 Commercial Street. John Patterson. John's with us tonight. John, well, Ty, do you want to tell us what you know about what John's got going for us? Then we'll let John talk a bit.
Thanks, Jeffrey. It was like maybe if Jeff.
Few words.
You two should.
So this is kind of a good, I think a good opportunity here. John's partnership and helped purchase the Vallis, and they're interested in renovating the Vallis Hotel. And so, you know, the RDA, that's been our big focus, is renovating these old buildings that have been vacant or partially vacant for several years. And one of the biggest reasons being is occupancy is difficult without bringing it into code compliance. So if you came in today and said, I'd like to get a business license and do this, then we'd say, well, let's, you know, you got a bunch of upgrades to do, right, before you're allowed to even do occupancy for that type of a project. And so John and I have talked, you know, about his development, his plans, and the finances. I've just told him, you know, well, we don't have any extra money in the RDA because of that hotel incentive has taken our entire incentive. And then we're actually making this proposal to go to the other entities and see if they want to increase their contributions to the RDA. And then I don't know why I hadn't done this sooner, but I did the math, and we actually have enough money to fund one project. So what it is we're, for what we collect and what the RDA incentive is, we're about $16,000 deficit each year, but we have an $87,000 fund balance. So that's just this year's scenario, but next year we'll collect a little bit more, right? And then the next year we'll collect a little bit more. So I don't have two hands, but basically they'll intersect, and I think we'll be just fine with one project, you know, with our grant program, not to exceed the 40,000. And so I haven't looked at our grant program says no more than 50. So so anyway, that's kind of where we're at. So while we're having an RDA meeting, John was able to get his application put together. And so the other part of the meeting was to just talk about redoing that contribution, which would also make it possible to do other projects in the future. But I don't think that discussion is necessarily, this project isn't contingent necessarily on that future financing. I think we could do it out of our current budget. And so John did the bank building as you're aware, and I went through that process with him and the reimbursement process, and he did a really good job, probably too good a job since he does accounting. Made me go through all the receipts and what was that system that you had where it was like A13?
That was all cross-referenced.
Yeah,
You
so,
had your sheet.
yeah, I had, anyway.
It had your sheet and then it was all cross-referenced. So if you
It's-
wanted to look at a particular invoice, you could just go down and
So-
find it.
So he had like one invoice, but it was parted out between where the actual bolt went, right? So it's like, here's your, that was probably a little extreme.
That was a
on
little
the bolt,
extreme,
but it
yeah.
was basically like this part of this bolt or this part of the invoice went to roof. This one went to electrical, and it was all categorized. So he did a really good job of accounting for them.
do.
Yeah. But on the reimbursement side, it was,
Don, tell us a little about the project. Tell us what you got in mind. Tell us what your stars, tell us what your vision is for event, what your hope is when you finish it out. Tell us what you're doing.
So I've already raised the money and that's sitting in the bank. And we're in the process of working with Steve Cornell, who's now at FFKR and was the former state historic architect. This project is also leveraging the state and federal historic tax credits. So the nomination right now for the historic district is covering us at the moment for that being either a part of a district or a standalone building. Initially, the Vallis was not listed as a contributing member, but the Morgan Historic Society was able to provide me a bunch of photographs, and I was able to show that even with the Trompe l'oeil that was put on for the movie, that the facade was still very similar to what it was in 1937. And that's when Virgil Stewart did a major remodel on it. And I've even got some of the, I got set number 3 from the architect that did the work on that. We've got a budget set for rehabilitation of the entity, of the building rather. The second and third floors will remain housing apartments. Because of the tax credits, Airbnb or VBRO won't be able to do that for about 5 years. To fully leverage those historic tax credits, it's got to be housing, but it can't be transient housing. The old Morgan Theater was in the main floor. I'm not old enough to remember it. Yvonne Kennison had her Morgan Academy of Dance in there for about 20 years, but aside from that, it's been little used, and our intent is to get that reworked and used for commercial space of one type or another. It would be nice to kind of keep it open and maybe an event center, maybe to possibly complement some of what the with the cobblestone next door. And hopefully we get some more activity on Commercial Street where meals could be catered in. So that's the hope there.
Do you have any plans for the basement?
The basement actually contained the bathrooms for the theater. And that was in those 1937 plans. So with the part of the budget is reworking those bathrooms. And the basement has been used as an apartment in the past. Whether that's appropriate going forward. I did see at the Broadmoor Hotel in Colorado Springs, in one of their basement areas, they had an art gallery. So, there's the main entrance to the basement that's on Commercial Street between the current coffee shop and the Vallis, and there's also a rear exit as well. But we'll be The architects have been in and they've got the as-is drawings done. So we're in the process of going through and redlining those for the changes.
So that you're into it and you're started then.
It's,
I don't want to impose on you, but those of you that haven't been to the bank building for a while, with John's permission, I'd invite you to go by and look and see what he's done with that building. He's unlocked the old bank building there and done, a lot of good things there. So with your permission, John, I'd like to invite the council members to, at your convenience, contact you, maybe come through that if they'd like to see the kind of work you do and the style you do and the expertise you have, if that's okay.
that's fine.
Another thing, John is interested in keeping the original names. He's not going to rename them Patterson Villa or John's Place. He wanted to keep the bank building as the bank building. He wanted to keep the Vallis as Vallis. So he's interested in maintaining the heritage that's been there, which I think is not part of the thing in John's, for John.
So for years, just a backstory on that, and I think it was the historian Lorraine Smith,
Linda.
Linda, talked about the hoods over the windows being removed for that movie in 1994. After going over the photographs, I realized the hoods were removed in the 1930s.
Oh.
What was removed was the neon sign that was put on in 1937. That was what was stored with the city and subsequently discarded. But we do have some pictures of it, and we'd like to actually get one replicated to put back on there.
Okay. So the questions for John or tie on this project?
I have a couple.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, John, is any part of the building still being used then as a rent for, say, apartments or hotel?
Yeah, there's three, two apartments have been kind of combined into one, but there's three apartments on the second floor, and those three are still currently rented. Our plan was to get the third floor in the old theater rehabilitated first and then go to the second floor. We have received notice from one tenant that they will leave at the end of March, so that may advance some of the work on the second floor.
As you look at the building, it's an old building. I don't know whether you've had an engineer look at it or not, but structurally, is there work that needs to be done there? As foundations, walls, and roof.
With the roof, yes, because the building has parapets. Jason Love with Silver Peak Engineering has been up and looked at it and is working with the architect now to get those plans in. So the building currently has a metal roof which leaks, and the roof going on will be similar to the roofs that have been put on with the other remodels, with the bank, with the restaurants. Forgetting the type.
Membrane.
What's that?
Membrane.
Membrane. It'll be membrane, and because all of the old roof is coming off, the code requires that the parapets be addressed, kind of like with the bank and with the old physical therapy building. So that will require tying the parapets in as well as a diaphragm of the roof as well.
You feel the building itself is intact, though?
By and large, yes.
It was built well. Just Ty, a question for you. To incorporate this project, does that eliminate any others down the road for a period for a while
Yeah, we thought we were done with projects
with the hotel?
already. Yeah. So then any future projects would just be contingent on our next discussion about changing the formula with other taxing entities.
Gotcha.
So just final comment is, if you look at the application, the amount, this is a much more significant investment for the same amount of grant that we've had in the past. So it's a big building. It's a heavy lift. And then we just focus on the space. So one, it'll increase the the property value, but it'll also make another space that can be rented, that main level. Just has a lot of opportunity. I think people are always looking for space. A big open room, we're always looking for a big open room
So,
here, so.
so Ty, that leads into my question I had. So we're looking at $1 million here. Is that correct?
Potentially, yeah.
What's the business plan or what's the expected ROI on this thing? I mean,
So that's the grant incentive that I put together is based on the property, the increase in property value. So we structured it just based on the capital improvements will pay itself back. It was based on a 10-year payback. So even if there's not a business there, but the property gets reassessed, so they have to do a building permit, the property gets renovated.
okay,
At that point, when they get occupancy, their taxes get reassessed, and so the property value just went up. So we don't really get into the business plans as much anymore. Because it's a capital investment more so than, is it gonna be events or is it gonna be, if that makes sense. So, well, so we're not, so before, we used to help out with rent. We used to do operational expenses, right? So we were a lot more concerned about the business plan because some of our money was either gonna go bye-bye or not based on how that worked. And so anything that they do to generate, to one, not have a vacant space is a positive. But it's all based on the capital improvements.
With the capital improvements, which increase the tax value.
absolutely.
So what's,
Yeah.
with this change, with what John's doing, it'll increase the tax value and the property tax will pay that back.
Yeah. So,
Property tax improvement.
yeah, and then just the way, the way I look at it, it's like, even if they converted a couple to an Airbnb status, that still generates transient room tax. It's
Other
taxed at
stuff.
100% value.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
But the building, they could do a lot with the building. So the other thing is even if somebody took advantage of this grant, renovated the building and sold it, it's still, yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the idea.
Brings up a follow-up question too. And John, this isn't any reflection on you, just on the process in general, if you will, but on our part, on the RDA part, on the city part, are we concerned about the ability of the developer to fund the project and complete it? In other words, if we got halfway through and money dried up, where do we go from there? Or do we care about that?
So process wise, they don't get reimbursed until after.
Yeah, this is
Completion.
After the event.
So that's how come he's got to turn in receipts, so he pays for it. upfront.
Yeah, and that's why it's an up to amount. So then if they turn in receipts and, for example, they say, okay, so we decided, the roof was fine, so we're not gonna do the roof. And they don't have enough expenses on the capital portion of that, then it's just an up to amount. So it's 10% up to,
So on our part, any improvement's a good improvement, even if we only finished at 25% and the economy tanked and
Yep.
everybody had to go their own way.
yeah, and then that's how I view that too, right? So if they say, well, we got a bunch of money put together, whatever happens with the economy. And we took the building to this certain point through a building permit process, it's still old building with a new roof. Or it's still an old building that is now up to code compliance with,
It would have value based on the improvements that have been added to it.
yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of the risk factor. And when we started this a couple of years ago, that's the issue. It's like, well, we've had people look at buildings, but it's like, that's a little too much for me to stomach. I'm not going to take on that risk. And maybe that was what they got back from the bank on that side. It's like, so
Shady, I'm sure.
no, no, I'm just teasing. It's,
Let me try and explain one of these for a minute.
Okay.
Code improvement, let's take that for example, that line on code improvement, for example. John's gonna come in there and he's gonna put in some handicap rails, he's gonna put in some handicap bathrooms, he's gonna put in some stairway, proper treads, proper doorways. You can do all those kind of improvements for the code. You're gonna redo the electrical system, so it's up to code, heating system and so forth. As John does a project, as he does these electrical projects, bring up the code, if it costs him, 60,000, then at that point he could turn that in. We'd pay him 10% of his 60,000. We'd pay him a portion of that when that project's done. John does another piece. He does his handicap stuff. It costs $10 of the handicap stuff. They bring in his bill, his receipt saying he's paid for the handicap piece. Then from this 10, we'd pay him another portion of that. So this 50,000 is not a year for 5 years. It's the total max at the end of the project. And John can do these in any order appropriate. And he brings in receipts then and works out the worksheet. Then we pay him a portion of that particular part of the project to reach that max amount. Did that help clarify it any, or just muddy the water further for you?
So,
I could just add one
Go ahead.
more thing. Sorry, Tony, just the other thing is that top line item on the purchase price, that one doesn't get reimbursed until the entire project is finished. So you don't get credit for the purchase of the building unless the entire project's finished and the grant's closed out. So that's kind of that other component of like, where do we, if they got started and
Eliminates a little bit of the risk on the RDA.
yeah, how much we're out. So, sorry.
so
Go ahead,
I mean,
Tim.
I understand the city's position on this. I mean,
Okay.
I understand that it's tax increment money that, so I guess in my mind is this thing gets built out. All these improvements are made, the taxes on it go up, whatever, clearly it's a good project for the city. Okay, heaven forbid, but eventually it was unoccupied. It doesn't matter, that tax rate's going to remain the same.
Yep.
So that's what you said a minute ago. We really don't get concerned about the business plan too much. We just concerned about the capital improvement to the building. Yeah, okay, just want to be clear on that.
Or
And the risk on this building's actually isn't all eggs in one basket. So you have 2 floors that are housing, and then you have a main floor that is commercial. And up here in Morgan, I've even been approached asking when we'll be done, because people would like to, rent an apartment there. So I'm not forecasting a difficult ability to have the rooms rented. I think the bigger wild card is what kind of business can we get into the old theater and
Downstairs. How many apartments do you foresee eventually?
5, 2 on the main floor or 2 on the 3rd floor, 3 on the 2nd floor.
And for-
Ty, do you need the blessing of the county and the school district to move forward?
on this, no.
Because we already have the funding.
yeah, so this is the RDA board. And in this capacity, I'm the executive director of the RDA. And so just that funding has already been collected, set aside to the RDA. It's this board's purview. And then once approved, I do the reimbursement with the applicant, and then I report back at the end. But
Any further questions?
Tonight's really just a discussion, correct? Or do you want us to make a motion?
The resolution. It's a nice discussion. And I guess, yeah, thank you, Eric. Thank you, Eric. You're right on it. Perfect. So the question is, you feel, the thing you do is decide if you feel approve of this project enough to pursue it. If you want them to come back in next meeting with a resolution. If you think, hey, no, John, sorry, we love you. We love the idea, but we're not interested. That's one thing you don't come back. But if you say, hey, John, this is a good project. We appreciate it. We do have the funding. We could fund it. Then if that's our feeling, then we'll come back next meeting with a resolution. So we kind of,
or if there's concerns, on the grant for the full amount,
yeah,
it's
we
like
could change it
a
up.
portion or like, whatever it is, then we can talk about all those options.
So options, questions, concerns? Do you want to see it go forward, come back with a resolution? Do you want to change any of it? What's your thought at this point?
I'd love to ask a question that can't be answered, but I'm curious as to what the taxes is currently on the building and what the forecast would be if all these improvements are made.
Don't know now, but I could go over to the Gwen's and get the answer in 5 minutes.
The valuation on the building is about $330,000 or $360,000. The taxes are actually assessed with living space on the second and third floor and commercial space on the main floor. The current taxes are just north of $3,000. Somebody was talking about a rate of return based on the current mill levy effective in the county. I was using between $8,000 and $9,000 post-construction on expected property taxes.
So they'd roughly go from 3 to 9 with the information John just presented. $6,000. $6,000 a year would be your plus. At today's rates. If the county raises probably rate school does, and that would change that.
Not sure what the county did earlier, so that may have already bumped up.
Good question. Thank you, Tony. Other questions,
There
other
you go.
thoughts?
I'll give my thought. I think I'd go ahead and bring us back a resolution, is what I'd say. It's my vote.
Taking it. Okay.
I appreciate the comment on the work that John's done heretofore, and John, we appreciate that. And I think that goes a long ways in saying, let's move forward.
Okay. Tony?
Oh, it would really be nice to have that building.
I
improved.
agree.
No question about it. It needs to be improved. So I think anything we can do to help in that regard is.
Okay. Jeffrey?
Oh, why? I guess one more question, John. All the space in the bank building occupied?
Yes.
They're all those offices are.
Yeah, the 4 offices I created are occupied.
Need to walk in there.
Good.
Yeah, go ahead and see it. Jeff?
Yeah, good.
Okay. So what I'm hearing from the council is they like the idea. And they'd like to see us proceed with a resolution for the next meeting, bring the resolution back. From Ty's work as far as the funding, we do have sufficient monies in the RDA to fund this project currently. So with that, there's no further discussion on that. We'll move to the next item. Okay, next time, thank you, John. Thanks for being here. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for your presence there on Commercial Street.
You're welcome. You guys meet next Tuesday?
No, probably the first, like 11th of January.
No, I meant for if you'd be available, since you guys kind of come together on Tuesdays, if that would be a good time to meet at the old bank. And
We,
Oh, tour of the bank.
Oh, to go
Yeah,
tour the bank.
yeah, we gotta do it individually.
I've
Yeah.
actually, I've been in it. It's. That building down there, yeah, that old zoo, that old-
the best thing to do is for them to contact you individually, come individually, rather than as a group. Okay.
Go through all the hoops of having us
All right.
all together.
Okay, I'm number 3 on your agenda then. Item number 3 is dealing with the current tax formula for the RDA. Involves the city and the county and school district. Some of you are aware, not all of it, as far as how that works. Currently, made some change over what the RDA used to be. Currently, the city, being the RDA body, collects the full tax increment from the county property taxes. Then, based on formulas, that money is given back to the county, the school, and the city from the base. And then we've agreed to take 100% of what the base was, and then a certain percentage of the incremental new growth. As Ty presented that a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, as we talked with them, we talked about potentially changing that formula if new viable projects come forward. The school district and the county, they were ready to throw the RDA away. And then they looked at the hotel project and they said, yeah, we can see the benefit of that financially. So, okay, let's renew the RDA with these certain parameters. And as we left those meetings, I says, if we have some other viable projects that appear to be appropriate to the school and county, would you be okay if we come back and revisit the formula? And the answer at that point was yes, they would be. So the question tonight from the RDA, we need to direct Ty if we're interested in having Ty go back to the school district and the county and readdress the formula, increase the formula so there's more money available in the RDA for future projects. That's the concept and the idea. So you can take as much time as you want to flesh out the formulas if you want, or you can give Ty the go ahead to go ahead and proceed if you want to do that. You would also present that new formulation would be presented to the city council as well for your approval on as well as the county council, as well as the school board, as we redo that formulation. If that's something you would like to see proceed and have done. Questions?
Yes,
Go ahead.
sorry.
No, that's fine.
100% base. So the total retained on this sheet is 112,614, okay? That's with the 100% base.
Mhm.
The hotel incentive, like is, well, it shows 128,000 here on 25% base.
Mhm.
So I guess my question is if the total, I realize this is a moving target, things change, I get that, but with that 112,000 in the future, would that even cover the hotel incentive?
Not by itself.
I mean, how short would that
But
be?
what that was of the base. And then there's 25% is 25% of the new growth.
Yeah,
So we get some money in addition to base, getting money from the new growth. So as everything, as we have new properties on commercial street developed in the RDA, and then we have an additional tax value come in, that we get 25% of the increase. So the one thing probably, and I can't speak for Ty, I think one thing probably is leave the basis alone and just adjust the percentage of
25%
the new growth. And that'll bring in some additional money. So I'll let Ty speak to that.
Yeah, so the 100% you see there is the total collected, the total value of the RDA. So the total is 222,000 on the total
Right.
agencies. This year, we're projected to retain after the other entities are paid based on our 60/40
The 112.
The 112,000.
split 112,000. So that's the previous, yeah, so that when I mentioned there's about a $16,000
Different.
deficit, that's what I'm talking about. And so we have an $87,000 fund balance that was just kind of like, we'll just chip away at that. That's why we weren't going to do any other projects. We don't have the actuals yet. We will in January of what we retain. These are still estimates for this year. I looked it up just to see if I could tell. And so that's what the current projection, but every year that 112 will go up even without changing the formula, just because property values increase on an annual basis. And so I think we're only a year or two out from a break-even scenario. And so with this other project, I think we'll be okay. We'll be in a break-even scenario, but we won't be able to do any future projects. So the proposal is so on that column D, or where it says 100% base, currently the next one is 40%, and then currently 75% margin. That's what the current agreement is. And so this changes that to a 75-25, where the entities would collect, they would keep 25%, and then just 75% of the base would come to the RDA. And then it would get rid of that marginal increase. So essentially what we're doing is saying we're going to go from a 60-40 to a 75-25. That's the easiest way to say it.
Not worried about the base.
On the new growth.
On the new,
On everything collected. So every year, the RDA, we'd be asking for
Okay.
75% of everything collected the RDA would retain, and we give 25% back to the taxing entities. And so it really, the formula we're looking at adjusting is the 60-40. So originally the RDA started at 100%. 100% went to the RDA, and then over the years that went to 80, and it went down. And where the old RDA left off was a 60-40. And so that's why when we went back to propose, we said, we just want to keep it intact. You know, we're still working on this hotel incentive. We have enough there that we can incentivize a hotel. But if we do get the hotel, then we're going to probably need to come back and then adjust that amount like it had been in the past. So what this spreadsheet does is at the very bottom, you can see there's a couple columns I added that said if we went to the 75-25, the difference to each taxing entity would be as it reflects there. So for the county, they'd receive 10 grand less, than they normally did. But the CDA up at the dealership is set to end. This is its last year. And so those taxing entities would get, that project dissolves, they're set to receive 100% of that one back. And so the net difference is on that bottom column. So, or that where it says net difference. And so what I did there is just to be able to go back and say, hey, we'd like to do a 75-25, like what we talked about. Hopefully you still recognize the value of these projects that we've done to, commercially do this commercial street activity. And one of them, not only it's the capital renovation, but there's some sales tax happening, even on the end building where they have the outfitting store, they have a flooring store. So there's other benefits. They have a gym that a lot of the students use. So that's kind of the idea. But while we do that, you're also set to get the CDA money back. So you're almost at a break-even scenario, even though we redo the formula, just to help them understand it's really not giving up.
Not digging into their pockets.
Yeah. And in the scheme of things, in the scheme of all property tax, it's a minimal investment for a lot of potential future growth. And so after I did those numbers, then the very bottom line shows you what additional that would create, 38,000 per year, which means, we could do one project a year at this funding level, which we've done, we did 3 in 2020 and 2021. This would be our 4th if we do that one. And we still have, I think it's 38 vacant parcels within the RDA boundary for brand new builds. The property out in front of the hotel, that sort of thing. But on Commercial Street, we're pretty much, we're close to 100% occupancy. It's just the Vallis has some vacant space, and then the Buzzy's building, I think, is essentially ready to go. So that's the discussion. But in easy terms, it's just saying, hey, can we go from a 60-40 to a 75-25?
On the numbers there, Ty, you said we started out the RDA started out at 100. We end up over, successive events to 60-40. What drives that?
Just the agreement that we had with the original RDA. It was just set up that way.
Original agreement, but somebody said, I want more of the pie, it sounds like, as we drive these changes to the 60-40. Will that be a barrier in trying to go back up now?
I don't think so. The other thing we can do is, because our agreement, the way our agreement is, where we collect 100% of it and then we pay back the entities, we can go year to year and just say, how much are you willing to contribute if they would like to. This board has that ability under the current agreement, is we can even year by year say, well, for 3 years, let's do this percentage and see how it works out. the original RDA, I think the enticement there was, let's start at 100, get it some legs, but let's, as that, produces results, then we'll just back off on the percentages. And even under that scenario, the property tax value has increased exponentially over those several years. Yeah, and some of them are in that RDA report.
Would each entity perhaps have their own agenda? In other words, would the county look at Commercial Street and say, well, that isn't directly related to the county, Morgan, you benefit more from that than the rest of us, than Mountain Green does. We want a smaller part rather than a bigger part.
So the county probably has the biggest benefit.
Okay, there's
Yeah.
a good point.
So they get the school district gets the majority of property tax. So they like that, but they also like development that doesn't necessarily add students to the school. So in their funding, it's like, if we can get more commercial property tax, but not necessarily more students to serve, that's an advantage to the school district. The county gets the next largest portion of property tax, but they also get 4.25% of transient room tax, and they get 0.5% of sales tax on top of the property tax. And so,
Good selling points when you.
because it's inside the city, they don't necessarily provide any of the services. The city takes care of all of their water and their sewer and their curb, gutter, sidewalk, storm drain, snow, like all of the stuff that makes that happen.
Find them of all of that.
So it's a really large, good advantage to that. And then, for the city, everybody recognizes the value, I think, of just the placemaking and being the kind of the population center for the whole county, and
So
That's
John, the
character.
takeaway is you can only rent to old people.
We gotta give him a nod, Ty, before we go into our work session, Mayor. Is that what we're looking for tonight? On this?
What we need to do is put formula together. Let's just give you an idea what it looks like. How that put formula together enough to come back to all three entities.
Okay.
This is again a head nod, say, yeah, Ty, we're in favor of doing that. We like the idea, the concept, proceed. That's all we are on tonight. It's not.
And then if I get pushed back or one of the entities doesn't want to participate or they don't like the formula, then I just come back and say, well, I went, and this is what I found. And then we want to reapproach it or not.
75-20 is arbitrary. I mean, you could have been, or 25, you could have been 80-20 and. is
What
that
I-
just
what
you
I
feel
did
you
is
can
I-
sell?
Well, what I did was try and generate another $40,000
Okay.
without a negative impact to the taxing entity. So I
Tried to balance the.
typed this in a couple of times because I'm not as good with formulas. So I just manually went in and
Yeah.
kept going till I found that trigger point of like, this is really close to 40 and it's almost a break even scenario for the entities. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I'd be in favor of moving forward.
I'm good. Head nod.
You like it?
Yeah.
Questions?
Yeah, if you take the 222 and 56 though, and the 109, 541 total paid, that's more like a 51-49 split.
Which one? From last year?
If you take the
Yeah,
222 and 56, and then the
because-
109, 541, that's.
So that's because last year was the 40, but it included 75% of the new growth.
Okay.
Growth.
I was gonna say, I
Different-
did math at Morgan High School.
It was a
but,
different formula last
I
year.
was looking for 60-40 and I couldn't find it.
Well, and that's why I tried to simplify the discussion because last time it had 75% of the new growth, which complicates the formula.
60-40 went away with the new RDA.
That was.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 years ago.
But I do like going back to just a straight formula so we don't have to pull out
That
that.
makes sense.
You're right. Numbers you're on, Tony, were a base plus it's.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it's.
You're right.
A lot easier to just do a straight formula.
Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
Tony?
Yeah, what? Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Move forward.
okay, all right.
Good to go.
Anything else in the RDA? Okay. So we adjourn. Then the RDA meeting, get ready to start the work session.